GAG Global Forum. My name is Daniel Ampoma. I'm a member of GAG Global Forum. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you today to this program that has been organized in partnership with Beyond the Return. Today's forum is the second in a series of forums that GAG has lined up to discuss and to offer solutions to pressing global concerns. And I'm so pleased to welcome my co-host, that is the president of GAG, Mr. Kwame BOAKYE-DANQUAH, to introduce our panelists. And today I say thank you and welcome everybody to our global platform. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Daniel Ampoma. Recent events involving killing of Black men by police have sparked expression of outrage, protest, and injustice across the United States and the world in general. In 2014, the killing of Brown by police in Ferguson, that's Miami, ignited both riots and peaceful protests. Since Ferguson, numerous other events, including the death of Freddie Gray, outings Sterling, etc. Today, we are here to talk about police brutality in the United States, the unwarranted or excessive and often illegal use of force against civilians by the U.S. police. So I will start by introducing our guests. Today, we have wonderful guests. So I will start by introducing Miss Aisha Braveboy. She's a state attorney, is a top law enforcement officer in a county, that's Prince George's County in Maryland. She's responsible for the safety and security of over 800,000 citizens. Her motto for the office under her administration is that crime is personal. Personal to the victim, personal to the community, and personal to the state's attorney's office. Ms. Braveboy has ushered in significant changes during her first year in office. Two of her priority pieces of legislation were successfully passed by the General Assembly in Annapolis in March. One will strengthen Maryland's hate crime status, and the other will make strangulation a first-degree felony. She has also put in place bail reform, which means the county will no longer require cash bail as a required for pre-trial release in cases where the person isn't in danger to society and doesn't pose a flight risk. This is a major policy which will ensure that individuals who can't afford bail will not languish in jail. She has also reorganized her juvenile justice units and created community partnership to end the school in prison pipeline. One of her major priorities, in addition, Ms. Braveboy has created a number of new units in her office to better address criminal justice needs. Overall, her goal is to ensure that justice is administered in Prince George's County and to ensure that it is done fairly. They will continue to take steps to end crime and injustice. Welcome on board, Ms. Aisha Braveboy.
Thank you.
Welcome.
We also have in our midst Her Excellency Ambassador Arikana CHIHOMBORI-QUAO. She's a medical doctor. In her role as permanent representative to the African Union in Washington, D.C., Her Excellency Arikana CHIHOMBORI-QUAO, who is a medical doctor, worked tirelessly towards fulfilling her mandate, which has to undertake, develop, and maintain relationship between the African Union and executive and legislative branches in the United States government. The African Diplomatic Corps, the African in the Diaspora, and the Forcing Wood Institute. This was specifically in relation to the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, that's AFCFTA, and advancing the priority areas in Agenda 2016. In fulfilling this mandate, she brought renewed energy to the AU mission, as well as new ideas and programs that were implemented since her appointment in 2016 to her departure in 2009. Her efforts at mobilizing the diaspora and as people of African descent and not as citizens of any single African country is unprecedented and exemplifies her ability to unify people around the common goal, speaking with one voice as one African and one continent. Additionally, Her Excellency Ambassador Arikana CHIHOMBORI-QUAO, who is a medical doctor, has been actively involved in various programs and projects the African Union. In 2012. She became the chair of the AU Diaspora Health Initiative, where she has involved in mobilizing African diaspora health professionals to assist in addressing the healthcare needs of the African continent. Even prior to her appointment as AU ambassador, her contribution to the cause of Africa had earned her many positions, prestigious positions and honors and awards. Two of her most cherished ones are an achievement award received in 1996 from incumbent president at the time, Her Excellency the late President Nelson Mandela of the Republic of South Africa, and the West African Women Executive Awards in July 2015. During the AU Summit in Johannesburg, South Africa, she received the award alongside with 15 prominent African women, including the former president of Liberia. Welcome, Your Excellency. Thank you. And also the next online is my senior brother, my big brother, the one and only King Kwesi-Che-Dankwa. King Kwesi-Che-Dankwa is a TV personality, also known as KKD, the one and only KKD. King Kwesi-Che-Dankwa, also known as KKD, TV personality, media, brands, cultural specialist, the CEO of the finest production and the heritage apparel, who is domiciled in London. Welcome on board, my brother. So I will turn the table to Dr. Daniel Ampuma.
Thank you so much, Kwame, for your presentation. To everybody who is on this platform, we just want to officially welcome everybody. Today, GAG's Global Forum, it's in partnership with Beyond the Return. And obviously, this is going to engage in our distinguished personalities on the topic, police brutality in the United States, the unwarranted or excessive and often illegal use of force against civilians by the US police. Ms. AG Aisha Braveboy, what is police brutality and why is it so much of a burning issue today?
Police brutality or excessive use of force, which is also sometimes referred to, is when an officer exceeds his or her authorized use of force in dealing with a civilian. And so that could involve everything from detaining someone who they should not have and then using force to detain them, to hitting them, to choking them, and in some cases, unfortunately, killing individuals. And so what my office would do is look at the amount of force used, and we'd have to make a determination of whether or not that the officer exceeded his or her the force which he or she is authorized to use under those circumstances. When it comes to police brutality, it is, certainly something that our office takes very seriously. We are very concerned that those who have been sworn to protect and serve us, who have an awesome responsibility and also authority in our communities, don't exceed their authorized use of force, because what that can lead to is distrust in the community. It leads to an individual's rights, both civil and constitutional, being violated, and ultimately it could lead to serious bodily injury or death. And so, so what you have seen all across America, and certainly in recent days with George Floyd and others, is our police officers exceeding their authorized use of force and engaging with civilians, and unfortunately, sometimes it ends up in death.
So then if we look at the fact that, we've had all of this police brutalities all across from the north, south, east, and west of the United States, then what makes the US police so brutal and violent in their actions? Any summations on that?
So my thoughts on that, honestly, are that we need to really retrain our police and have them think differently. They are law enforcement, so they are there to enforce the law, as opposed to what I consider my prosecutors to be. I think police need to also consider themselves to be problem solvers. And so if we take, if we give police officers the ability to solve problems that don't involve confrontation with civilians, that don't necessarily call for an arrest or detention, then we can have more positive interactions on our streets. And let me give you an example. You have someone, let's say, who is loitering or who is trespassing. Right now, what officers do is they arrest that person. Oftentimes, they take them down to the jail, they process them, and generally, unless they've had several failures to appear, they are released by the commissioner. But wonder if the officer, instead of enforcing the law, arresting that individual, detaining them for a period of time, having those negative interactions with that civilian, what if that officer was empowered to say, how can I help you? You can't be here, but tell me, why are you here? And what services do you need? If we would reward them from actually solving the problem for that individual or taking them to a place where they can get their issues addressed, rather than simply charging them and going through the criminal justice process, then I think that the police will see themselves differently. Certainly the community will see them differently. And I believe that we would have less negative interactions and more positive interactions with our officers.
Thank you so much. Kwame, you want to take up the next one, please?
So I just want to find out from KKD, because how do you define police brutality?
Essentially, brutality is savagery, it's bloodthirstiness, it's wickedness, it's ferociousness towards another human being. What makes it different when it comes to police brutality is that this ferociousness, this brutality, this savagery is actually dished out by people who are authorized by the state. Authorized by the state, uniformed by the state, tooled and kitted out by the state. So police brutality is essentially state brutality.
We will take this advantage and welcome our mother, Her Excellency, Dr. Arikana CHIHOMBORI-QUAO. She joined us. Welcome, ma'am. Thank you.
So this is a follow-up to Mr. KKD to your question. And I just want to ask this straight out. The fact that if police who are engaged in acts of brutality, and if it's mandated by, per se, the department, or it could be whichever area they're coming from, then do we have any, in terms of, the department being complicit in the activities of the police? Do we see any complicity in those actions?
So you talked about complicity, right?
That's correct.
You're asking if the department is complicit.
Yes.
Of course, the department is complicit. But the point is, you see, every member of the police service or police force, whatever you choose to call it,
That's right,
works in a department. That department is accountable to the state within which it works. And so if there's police brutality going on, and it's not just something that's happened once, it's a freak accident, and you realize it's something that's continually occurring, then it's become the norm. I mean, it's become the norm for when people of darker skin shades are being arrested, there is too much physical violence. It's become the norm that when somebody of a lighter skin shade is being arrested, they can handle them gently. Look, somebody went out and shot people and killed people, And when he was arrested by the police, they didn't shoot him. They were able to take him gently. And on the way back to the police station, they were able to pass by a burger joint to get him a burger because he said he was hungry. Now that's humanity. Now that person will still face the full rigor of the law. The police may arrest, but then the attorneys will prosecute, and then the jury will convict. But in the case of the police service in the United States of America now, the police have become the arrester, the prosecutor, and the jury. So now that it's happened more than once, we must stop saying it is just an individual. It is the entire police department, and it is the state as well. Because if you have any organization that is supposed to protect and serve, and is doing things that are no longer fit for purpose, you need to enact laws or change the methods and procedures so they're better able to serve the citizens. If nobody is doing anything about that, then all we can say is the powers that be are happy to see what is going on. So not only will you say the police department is complicit, you will eventually even have to say Congress and the Senate are complicit. Because what is the essence of being on the Senate if you're not going to help to make laws? What is the essence of being in Congress if you're not going to debate to put the best thoughts forward for the betterment of all the people in your society? So we must look at this police brutality thing holistically and say it is a failing of the American nation. It is the failing of America as a leader of the world. And this failing is based on mere skin color. Color is only skin deep, but it is skin color that is driving this agenda of police brutality. And we must discuss this, pointedly. We mustn't beat about the bush. It is a clear, organized, conscious decision by a certain section of society to brutalize, dehumanize, and possibly exterminate people of African heritage.
Yes. Her Excellency, Ambassador CHIHOMBORI-QUAO, how do you deal with the response of the very problems, social issues of our time, especially when we talk about black on black? Blacks are killing blacks, and we tend to blame the whites. So how do we deal with that?
I don't think we should limit it to to put a spotlight on blacks killing blacks. Whites are killing blacks as well. And so to isolate it and make it look like black behavior is exceptional, that's wrong. White people are killing each other, even in more, as a matter of fact, you kill those who are next to you. White people are killing white people. Why aren't we talking about that either? Because human beings will be human beings. What we need to focus on is white people targeting black people. I like an example that somebody gave to say there are children in a classroom and 10 children in a classroom, and the teacher feeds 9 out of 10, and the lady from the kitchen comes in and says, but so-and-so number 10 needs to eat. And the teacher responds by saying, they all need to eat. Yes, they all need to eat, but 10 has not been fed. And that's why the spotlight must be shown on number 10. We're not saying they don't eat to eat, they all need to eat. But to generalize it and just say, black people are killing each other. We all kill each other. That's humanity. It's sad, but it happens. To then shine light on black people when they kill each other, as if it's something exceptional, that's not right. It's the same thing they're trying to say. There's poverty in Africa, as if there's no poverty in the United States or other parts of the developed world. We should not allow ourselves to be singled out and make it look as if black people killing each other is unusual behavior. White people are actually killing each other more. There are more white people dying in the hands of other white people, and that's just a fact. So let's face it, let's not derail the conversation and push it to where, well, what difference does it make? Does that give them justification to kill us simply because there are some among us that are killing each other? No, let's not accept that excuse. What's being done is wrong, and it's based on this simple systematic racism. You heard the video that was leaked of police officers in North Carolina waiting for a race war, and they couldn't wait to kill Black people. That's where the problem comes in. This has nothing to do with Black people killing Black people. I hear that all the time. Please do not accept that conversation. They're trying to find a reason to say, well, you're killing each other, so is it okay for you to kill us? They're killing each other too. Believe me, I've worked in emergency rooms. I would see white people killing each other. If you live down south, I remember one horrific story where 5 guys, they wanted to kill one of their own, and they stretched the guy across the road, 2 holding one each leg and 2 one each arm, and the other one got in the truck and drove over the other one. White people doing this to each other. And I can tell you horror stories of what happens. In my case, my experience is down south when they're doing drugs in the mountains of Tennessee and the Carolinas. So don't talk to me about Black people killing Black people. White people are killing each other too. So let's not isolate that and make it as if Black people's behavior is different. That does not justify them killing us. Killing us simply because of the color of our skin, that's wrong. Now, if white people kill each other, whatever they're fighting for, that's their own thing. If Black people are killing each other because they're fighting for whatever, let's not mix the issue. White people are killing each other to the same extent that Black people are killing each other. Shining light on Black people and trying to justify their behavior is unacceptable.
You know, I'd like to agree with the ambassador because what she's talking about is not mixing apples and oranges. I mean, when individual or civilians engage in brutality against each other, it's different than when you have state-sponsored, state-supported, and sometimes, unfortunately, state-protected activity of individuals who have sworn, have taken an oath, who are trained to protect and to serve, and who use the authority that they are given to exact brutality on people who they are supposed to, in fact, be serving. These are 2 completely different things. The police at no other time would want you to compare them to an average everyday civilian. So we are not going to compare them today. Anyone killing anyone is wrong. It's bad. It's terrible. We understand that. And guess what? Those individuals, they are identified as a suspect. They get arrested. They are prosecuted. And generally, we always hope they are convicted. But when police, engage in certain types of conduct that may lead to death, they may or may not be arrested ever. They may or may not be prosecuted ever. They may not have to face a jury of their peers or a judge, depending on how they are treated by the state and what is tolerated in their department. And so these are completely different subject matters. And I appreciate the ambassador really focusing us on the issue at hand, which is that we, and I appreciate GAG for being a leader in this discussion, we cannot accept nor tolerate state-sponsored brutality. And I think it was the other gentleman, I do apologize, I don't know your name, who talked about that this is the state. You're absolutely right, this is the state, and the state has to fix it through legislation, through policies, and also through not tolerating certain behavior. As the prosecutor, my job is to prosecute not just civilians, but also officers when they break the law. And when you engage in brutalizing people on the streets, when you exceed your authorized use of force, my job is to hold you accountable, because I have to send a message that this won't be tolerated here in Prince George's County. Hopefully they'll hear it around the state of Maryland. But I do appreciate the fact that we are focusing on this particular issue, because this is the issue that is at hand today in America that we need to fix.
Attorney General Sabril, I'll follow up with a question. Yeah, you were able to get the criminal law hate crime basis second Lieutenant Richard Collins. You passed a Senate Bill 606 and a House Bill 917 passed as a law. Tell us how you look at this, and then could you throw more light for us? We just want to know what this bill is about.
Okay, well, let me just tell you that my office prosecuted a guy named Sean Urbanski. Sean Urbanski was a University of Maryland student. He targeted and killed Second Lieutenant Richard Collins III, who was an African-American student at Bowie State University, and at the time had just received a commission from the Army. So this is a bright young man who was enjoying his evening out near the University of Maryland's campus with friends of his. He and a friend decided to call it a night. They went to a bus stop that was on the campus, and they met another person there, and they were having a conversation. Sean Urbanski, who happened to be white, was also at the bus stop with friends. He left with his friends, and then he came back. But when he came back, he was brandishing a knife. He approached Second Lieutenant Richard Collins III, who was the only Black person at that bus stop at the time, and stabbed him in his chest, 3.5 inches. Unfortunately, Second Lieutenant Richard Collins III did not survive the injuries caused by Mr. Urbanski. Mr. Urbanski was detained, and let me tell you, he was treated very humanely. We have all of the video. Let me tell you, this person who the police suspected of killing another with a knife was treated like a human being. He was spoken to like a human being. He was handled like a human being. He eventually claimed that he didn't know, what had happened. However, we were able to show that this young man had hate in his heart. He had a bunch of very racist images on his phone. He was a part of a racist Nazi loving group. He was a racist. And that night, he killed Second Lieutenant Richard Collins III. The crime was charged as a first-degree murder. We also charged second-degree murder, and it was charged as a hate crime. The judge, before the jury got to hear or got to deliberate over all of those charges, the judge dismissed the hate crime charge because the judge believed that the state's attorney's office had to prove that hate was the only factor in the commission of a crime, which is totally preposterous and ridiculous because most crimes have mixed motives. That's any crime. But where you have a crime here with someone who is a racist, who in fact, after he killed Second Lieutenant Richard Collins III, his white friend who was at the bus stop with him, he motioned for him to walk away. Like, you're free to walk away, because he wasn't there to kill him. He already got who he wanted. But the judge said that, we had to prove that hate was the only motive. And so while we were able to convict him of first-degree murder, which was the top charge, so that is the lead charge, that is the charge that carries life imprisonment. We also believe that the laws needed to be changed to allow the state to be able to prove and hold people accountable for hate crimes. And so now we changed the language in Maryland's hate crime statute that would read, if hate is a substantial motivating factor in the commission of a crime, then it would be considered a hate crime. I think if that language was the language that was there when we prosecuted Mr. Urbanski, I'm certain that the jury would have found, I believe, the jury would have found him guilty of the hate crime. In fact, I believe the jury would have found him guilty of the hate crime had the judge allowed the jury to deliberate over that charge. But again, we are a nation of laws. Where we see inadequacies, if we don't believe that the law is sufficient, then it's our duty and our job to seek changes. And so we were grateful to be able to see that change this year. Mr. Urbanski will be sentenced later this year on his first-degree murder conviction. So I certainly update you all when that happens.
Thank you 80 brave boy. Mr. KKD, the topic of police brutality is not one of the most pleasant ones. Still, this issue is quite critical. It may cause severe social and interpersonal problems all across the United States and obviously in the Black community, as well as it may have massive impact on the development of the whole country. What are the social and psychological problems of police brutality?
You want me to take that?
Yes, Ambassador, yes. That's okay.
Okay, good. When you look at the history of Black people in this country, I was talking to a friend of mine, an African American, and the conversation started with, you continental Africans, you never have to worry about where you come from. And she said, this is something we deal with as African Americans. But she also went on to say, you all have a history. And she has parents who are in their 90s. And she said, I don't have a history from my parents. They tell me the history is too painful. It's a history of lynchings, a history of abuse, a history of rape. So consequently, they don't have the dining room table, dinner table conversations talking about their history. It's a history of a traumatized people. When you look at people who are traumatized, they are forever ready to fight and resist and push back because they are suffering, whether we realize it or not, from post-traumatic stress disorder over a long period of time. Black people in America have been traumatized. They're suffering from PTSD. The abuse in the communities, to think that policemen will parade the Black communities looking for people to mess with, looking for people to arrest. I've never lived in such a neighborhood, but I know that's what happens. I can't even imagine what it feels like to live in fear. The first time I heard about how a Black man should behave, should you be stopped by a policeman? That's just unbelievable. How can you live in such a society where you are so blatantly discriminated against? Psychologically, you will never quite feel equal to others around you. You are always inferior. You are always substandard. So that leads to your performance. It leads to your performance even in school as a little boy, because you hear the stories that are discussed at the dinner table by your uncles, by your other family members, the brutality that you grow up hearing and the way you must behave in order to protect yourself as a Black person living in this country. It is so traumatic at a very deep level, which is why you find that our performance, when it otherwise could be better, we are automatically feeling inferior. We have been beaten down. And sometimes it has been going on for so long that we don't even realize that our normal has changed. It's almost like a battered woman whose husband beats her up every day. After a while, she just assumes that being beat up every day by a husband is normal. And I've witnessed it with my own eyes. It's a terrible thing. It's really approaching humanity and traumatizing it from the core. And then the behavior that comes out, the anger, the reaction of certain men when they are approached by police, it comes from a deep-seated anger and realities of abuse that have been passed on from one generation to the other. It is very traumatizing, it is deep, and it is affecting a whole race. It's sad, but that is the reality. You see, at the rate at which young Black boys drop out of high school, some never even make it to high school, is because of this PTSD that they're suffering from, that they don't even realize, where they are made to feel that they're inadequate, that they're not good enough, that they can never quite make it to be whatever they want to be. So from a psychological point of view, there's subliminal messages, and there's also serious damage that's done at a subconscious level. But because it is so painful, most of us will just bury it deep in the subconscious until we are allowed to go there. Then when you see a black man approached by the police and they end up running like George Brooks did, because George Brooks was afraid. If the economy, they might just end up with their knees around my neck. So he decided to run. But it was something that you look at it, he was doomed if he did, he was doomed if he didn't. So can you imagine living in such a world? It is so traumatic, it has to stop. And we must understand it from the level at which it is coming from. So yes, psychologically, it's extremely damaging. And the black race, particularly in this country and in Europe, they really have been subjected to centuries of this. Even when we thought slavery had ended, this abuse, what we saw with George Floyd, was just everything coming to a boiling point, as if it was new. No, it has never changed. The lynchings just took on a different shape.
Yes, Kwame, take the next question.
Yes, yeah. My question goes to Her Excellency Aisha Brayboy, who has a keen interest in protecting the citizens of the United States. How do we stop believing in the myth of Columbus discovering America? And also, how do we educate human race about Spanish Inquisition?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we need to do a better job of having, you know, a more comprehensive and factual history taught in our schools. And so, you know, there's a movement here in Prince George's County, led actually by one of my employees who happens to also be the vice chair of the school board, to really look at how we are educating all of our young people on the history of our country. And history has always been written from a westernized, glorified viewpoint. And unfortunately, that has been ingrained in our culture and community. But it is time. It is time, because we have lots of scholars and we know the truth. And because we are also more global than we've ever been, our history begins in Africa. Our history is from that perspective. European history is a very brutal history. It needs to be also told from that perspective as well. Because America, and if you look at the issues we're having today regarding police brutality and all of that, it is ingrained in our system. It's ingrained in our policing because America started off with having those who came here and brought with them slavery, brought with them brutality, brought with them colonization, and a system where superior and everyone else is and that also our police departments started out in many of our communities. And so now when we start really teaching real history,
hello, bro.
When we start,
There's me, bro.
Oh, sorry, having a more global perspective of our history, I think that what you'll find, people who once thought they were superior to all will realize that they are not. And that I think society will be more humane, more civil, because now everyone will understand everyone else's importance. We didn't just come here as slaves. White people didn't discover America. Obviously, there were indigenous people here, indigenous people who looked like you and me too. It's not just the fair-skinned indigenous people, but there are indigenous people who looked more African, who were here as well. That is the history that needs to be uncovered and told and taught in our schools, and then also taught to those who want to protect and serve us. Because if they don't regard us as anything other than descendants of slaves, then that's why they can brutalize and beat us and not care about it. But when they understand that we had whole civilizations, that we ran every part of our economy, and that we are as valuable as anyone else, then my hope is that they will look and treat us differently. But if they don't, That is why you have folks like me who you elect to hold them accountable, and I certainly will. But education, I think, is very, very key. And let me just say, I do apologize. I have to go to one more event. So I wanted to be here longer, but unfortunately I could not. However, I have my wonderful Chief of Staff, Judy Saki Danso, who is a proud Ghanaian. She represents you very well in our office. She is basically my right hand. She is me. And so I am so grateful that she is on the line. And so she will take over and answer any questions that you might have for me. But Judy, please say hi to everyone so they know who you are and where you are.
Hi, Judy.
Absolutely. Yes, I'm here, Kwame. Thank you so much, Madam State's Attorney.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Sure. Thank you, AG Brave Boy. This question actually goes back to Mr. KKD. We know that policing as we know it is the maintenance of law and order. So what does it have to take to reduce excessive force and deadly shootings by police in the United States?
Well, the state must accept that they want to discontinue the history of the enslavers and plunderers and human traders and thugs clothed in authority, the aggressors, rapists, and murderers, many of them with Bible in hand and quoting it for their Christian goodness, and say those practices of that dark era must cease forever. We must be a better people. You see, it's all beautiful when we all want to do psychological romance and beat about the bush and not accept the problem as is. Even when the Emancipation Proclamation was made, what happened? In the South, there were light-skinned Americans going around looking for any black man to say, where are your papers? Because the whole idea was to arrest them and take them back to work as slaves. And today, black men are being arrested every day. Why? Because we incarcerate them so they can be used for next to slavery, which is almost free labor in the prison system. Let us not pretend we don't know this. Every lawyer in the United States of America knows this. Every judge in the United States of America knows this. The free labor force in the prisons of America is mostly black males. It is a desire of a certain part of society to return to the dark days of slavery. And we need to confront it head on. Every citizen, every congressperson, every senator, and this is neither Republican nor Democrat. This is about humanity. The police is a body mandated by law to protect and serve. But it's actually a mere tool for the prosecution of the interest of former slave owners and their descendants who were bequeathed the proceeds and estates from their evil deeds. The police have been cornered into the continuation of slavery until each one who acts as though his purpose is to catch by entrapment and bring any African-American man, woman, or child they can to be returned to the heinous crime of slave farms, slave roads, slave tunnels, and slave buildings in a bid to build the wealth of the lighter-skinned American. And I don't like this whole concept of black and white. It is a human construct. It is just a construct for othering. Who is black and who is white? Most of us are darker shades of coffee or chocolate, darker shades of caramel, and most of our people you call white are just shades of pink, you know? So what is black and white really? This thing is targeted at decimating the African-American population, decimating, dehumanizing people of African heritage. And let's call a spade exactly what it is. What we need to do is to have more protests, because, you know, if we don't protest, all we do is go to court, no laws get enacted. Because as we protest, people of humanity, people of conscience will know deep inside that this is wrong, what they are saying is right, we need to change. And here I want to speak about the educator Jane Elliott, you know, a brilliant educator who put children in the classroom and asks them about the color of their eyes and says, okay, today I'm going to tell you, the brown-eyed people are the smart ones. All the blue-eyed people are not so smart. Anybody who does not know about this, go online and check this experiment that she made and see what happened. But more importantly, in a big hall where a lot of white women and white men are seated, she says, any one of you here who would like to be treated the way our African-American brothers are treated, please stand up. Nobody stood up. So she asked the question again. Anybody in this hall, if you didn't hear me right, if you would like to be treated the way our African brothers and our African-American brothers and sisters are treated, please stand up. Nobody stood up. Why? Because they know that something wrong is being done to the African-American population. Now, if they know, why don't they want it changed? Is it a lack of humanity? Is it a lack of humanity? And today, you have a president who is very keen on bringing worse racial tensions, who only works towards just energizing a certain part of society so that you can bring more slavery, more anger based on color into America. You see, if we don't educate our own selves about who we are as a people, nobody will. Competence is not a color thing. Competence is a human thing. And competence comes from those who wish to do well. We want to do well, but people have their knees on our necks. And I say this as an African who strongly believes in the rise of Africans wherever they are in the world. It angers me when I travel to the United States and I see the way African Americans are treated. Well, it's not as bad in England, but it's there too. I guess maybe because of my profession and because of the way I'm clothed, a lot of times I get treated a little better. But you can't just attack somebody because you're wearing a hood. White boys wear hoods too, if that's what you want to call them. I call them pink boys because their color is pink, not white. This whole construct of black and white was just there to other us. Because way back in a certain era, they used to say, no blacks, no Chinese, no dogs allowed. Why? In this era, are you going to say the same? When the Chinese are your factory producing everything you need? We have to think as human beings and realize that whatever we do, whether we hold the Bible or the Quran, the main principle for all of us, whoever we believe we worship, is do unto others as you wish others to do unto you. You've had people's ancestors work for your ancestors for 400 years without pay, brutalized for 400 years, dehumanized. You've used that to build your wealth because you didn't pay them any money. In England, slavery was repealed only because the slave masters were paid. Slave masters were paid money in England because they were going to lose their slaves. The slaves were paid no money. And when you talk about reparations, you will find a few of our own brothers and sisters, even African Americans, dumb as and as thick as porridge, saying, no, we don't need reparations. You will even find some African Americans on television doing videos. Go and look at D.L. Hewley's wall on Instagram. Oh, I'm not African American. I'm Black American. Black lives don't matter. All lives matter. Well, in every society, as we say in Ghana, if you be a Mensa woman, in every society, you'll find the coons and the foolish ones. But the simple truth is, the dehumanizing of African lives has to stop. And the police has been used as the poster boy for dehumanizing African lives in America. So we need to keep protesting. And whilst protesting, we also need to go to courts to fight for better laws. We need to vote wisely, get everybody you know to register to vote. Because people think, oh, whoever I vote for, nothing is going to change. Well, something is going to change. I'm telling you what, the Democrats made some errors too. Because Bill Clinton's 3 strikes, you're out did not help. Because all the police needed to do then was plant some weed on you and you go to jail. That's all they had to do. And even with the introduction of body cams in America, a lot of the police go around with your body cams turned off or intentionally turned another way whilst they commit heinous crimes against humanity. You know, we have to be angry about this. But even in all our anger, we are not talking about doing to them what they have done to us. And I think that's another fear of the Anglo-Saxon population in the United States of America. that if these people would get up one day and think like we do and do to us what we have done to them for 401 years, we're toast. I think that's their fear. But if this is their main fear, then they should go listen to Cornel West.
Well said, KKD.
We
Well said.
of richer melanin, and now honestly, we of richer melanin in our skin are not about dehumanizing others. We're about living in peace and harmony. Some people who feel that their joy must only be based on the misery of others. If every policeman who has gone out there and killed somebody, whether in their sleep, whether standing on a street corner selling cigarettes, whether it's a child just trying to sell a squash or lemonade by the roadside and brutalize them, whether it's kids in a garden having a party and beating up on a 14-year-old girl, whether it's a boy just walking by and then you're holding him and pushing him against the wall, banging him against the wall and saying you want to search them. If the same were to happen to their wives and children, how would they feel? And knowing the evil they have done for years, they are afraid that if these people are free, they will do the same to us. But no, the evil you have done to the Native Americans is still there. But the Native Americans are not targeting to kill you. Change your ways. It is not too late for the world to live in peace and harmony. The police, as a force, as a service, is the poster boy for American brutalization of humanity.
Well said, KKD. I thank you so much. Yeah, I want to ask Her Excellency Judy Sechi Danso, as the Chief of Staff to Aisha Brayboy. How do you prevent the next George Floyd? How do you prevent Breonna Taylor? How do you prevent Austin Sterling? I mean, what are some of the measures that we can put in place to sort of stop this brutality in the United States of America? Judy.
Yes, Kwame, thank you so much for that question. And I think it goes back to a lot of what, well, one, KKD has absolutely hit the nail on the head on, in addition to what our state's attorney mentioned prior to her having to jump off the call, which really goes back to training. We have to be able to hold our law enforcement officers accountable. There has to be real innovative ways to really, you know, re-exercise or re-emphasize the need for training amongst our police departments, particularly when it comes to a lot of the basic constitutional rights that, you know, we as a citizenry have. I mean, oftentimes, many of these violations are of your Fourth, Fifth Amendments, the excessive use of force. It all falls into, you know, these various sorts of categories as it relates to constitutionality. And so I think that is absolutely where we begin. I mean, when it comes to stops and seizures on your basic traffic routine stops, these officers oftentimes are not even, you know, exercising departmental policies, regulations and laws that they're required. And what we're seeing is, you know, the result of an abuse of discretion. So it really goes back to ensuring that we can hold them accountable by, you know, putting forward the necessary types of training when it comes to stops, when it comes to searches and seizures, when it comes to custodial interrogations and detention, all of that. I mean, particularly when it comes to use of force. I mean, what type of force can be used? What's appropriate? What level of force, you know, breaches, obviously what is allowable. And then also having an opportunity to conduct the appropriate types of investigations when it comes to these instances where an officer is alleged to have been involved in some, you know, excessive use of force. Our office has begun to employ the services of an independent use of force expert so that when these cases and these instances of excessive use of force are brought to us, it is not our office that's doing the investigation. It is someone who has been, accredited and deemed to be, with the necessary credentials to sort of take a fresh eye and a fresh look at these cases and conduct the appropriate investigation, so that when the time comes for us to present these cases before a grand jury, there has already been an independent use of force expert that has reviewed these sorts of cases. But I certainly believe that our position would be to emphasize the need for retraining our officers, retraining our departments, and to kind of break down a lot of these historical mentalities around what policing in our communities look like.
So Ms. Derek, Ms. Judy, Derek Chauvin, the officer who was accused of kneeling on Mr. Floyd's neck until he was dead, had 18 prior complaints against him. This police officer was still policing the streets. Okay. So my question is, when it comes to training, how far and to what extent can the police department go to ensure that the bad nuts, I'm talking about the police who are in the system, needs to be getting rid of until they do more harm to more Blacks on the streets? This is for Ms. Judy. If you
Yes, that's a great question. No, I mean, and that comes with, the request for and the demand for greater transparency, where you have officers that have been involved in these sort of instances and have a history of complaints and or, misconduct in office. It's really imperative for, prosecutors' office across the nation to have access to that information. And that is one of the demands that our administration has been able to put forward to, our county executive, to our police department, to ensure that we can have access to those files, because we have to be able to protect the integrity of our prosecutions. And obviously, we do not want to have to rely on bad actors and bad police officers who are, engaging in this type of conduct. So it really does go back to a combination of training, but as you stated, certainly the access to those sort of internal affairs sorts of personnel files. So that is absolutely appropriate.
Okay. Mr. KKD, looks like you want to summarize in this.
Yeah, it saddens me, but police, they're almost at the level of, senior nurses in hospitals. Mm-hmm. These are people who protect and serve. How many weeks training does the American police have? This is supposed to be the leader of the world, and they're acting like a third world country. And your president calls third world countries by a name that any civilized person must not be saying in public. How many weeks does one have to train to become a police officer? Think about it. I mean, if you look around Europe, mm-hmm. I mean, the German police, for instance, they have to train for at least 130 weeks. In your police service in the United States of America, you can get out of high school, and after just about 14 weeks of training, you're a police officer. And you can go out there and protect and serve? Are you serious? Are you serious? Look, we're all global citizens now. You don't just sit in one country somewhere. Somebody can be in Burundi and be smarter and more competent at what they do than somebody who works in England. And if we are all opening our minds and thinking about everything everywhere and saying, look, for this kind of job, you need a certain level of expertise. You need a certain amount of humanity. You need a certain attitude. You don't get that in 14 weeks of training. So the whole police system in America needs to be reworked. I wouldn't say it's a joke, as people have said, on the internet so many times, but it needs to be re-looked at. You need people who are not just, he was a bum in school, he didn't do well, somebody took his girlfriend from him, so he wants to join the police force so he can wreak havoc on that person. Well, he was raised a racist by a father who lost his job and who saw some black people do well. And so his father's father was part of the group that went to burn down Black Wall Street. And he has that hatred buried in his heart. And he wants to wreak as much havoc on every dark-skinned person that he can find. So he joins the police. Now, if you have a longer training program for your police service who are mentally unstable, who are in your training, education, and you give them a gun to go out and protect and serve, that's something wrong with that society. This is supposed to be the greatest superpower in the world, and you cannot train people adequately before you give them a gun. That's something wrong with that. So yes, there are many bad nuts, and I don't like people saying there are few bad nuts. Too many bad nuts in the police service. Even the dark-skinned people, African Americans who serve in the police service, are also forced, coerced to do the very things that the descendants of the Anglo-Saxons in the police service are doing. Why? Because you're giving targets. Go out there, go to the black neighborhoods. Go to the places where you have the lowest common denominator of people with any success. And then naturally, you will find somebody who is just walking around the street and arrest them. He's walking because he doesn't have a car. If he had a car, he'll be in his car. How do you arrest somebody and say, because you're walking? That's crazy. And this happens in the country that is supposed to be the greatest superpower in the world in the year 2020. Not smart. Not smart at all. It is a shame. I'm African. Right? And I look at what's happening in the so-called greatest nation in the world, and I must say, with our modest possessions, you've got to pity the United States of America. You cannot even have a police service that can protect and serve your own people, but you can give instructions to other nations? How is that possible? Where is your moral authority? How does Breonna Taylor get shot in her own bed when the very people you were supposed to be looking for were already in custody? And the names are too many. Yesterday, how did he get killed? And where is the person who killed him? And when somebody says Black Lives Matter, I don't say all lives matter. Like Ambassador Arikana said, you know, you fed 9 people. There's one person you haven't fed. And when somebody says, oh, that person has to eat, you who fed the 9 people already say, oh, but everybody has to eat. What a joke.
Thank you, Mr. KKD. Kwame, you want to take the next?
Yes, I just want to also say, how do we solve this problem? How do we solve this problem? I mean, just one solution to a lot of things that we talked about, especially what KKD just said. So, Kwesi, I know you are keen interest in protecting people's lives, and you are a strong advocate for humanity. Let's come back home to Ghana, because some of us are from Ghana. So how do you sort of draw the line between police brutalities in Ghana? Is it tribal? Is it what? So how do you do that?
With all respect, I would like us not to divert from the topic, because you see, when you are the leader of the world, whatever you do has repercussions around the world. Yeah, in Ghana, we're not perfect. There is no brutality. Training is what is the biggest problem for the police service in the United States of America, as well as in Ghana. In Ghana, the biggest problem with the police service is petty bribery. That is the biggest problem of the police service in Ghana, petty bribery. You know, you can bribe a policeman to lie, help you lie about somebody. You can bribe a policeman if you don't have your papers for your car, and you just get on with it. But I must also quickly add that a good number of the police people are not comfortable with that. You know, but in the United States, 14 weeks training to become a police officer, for me, is totally inadequate. I mean, that's almost like holding a gun, not for somebody who's going to be making life and death decisions. So you talk about how we can deal with police brutality. Number one, retrain the police. You need to have a new schedule of training for the police, and you need to look at a new set of human beings that you employ into the police. These people are supposed to protect human beings. We're not looking for robots. We're looking for people who can think on their feet and make sound decisions, and think about the fact that their main mandate is to protect and to serve, not to exterminate. Because now I think too many policemen in America think they're soldiers. No, soldiers go out to war to fight the enemy. You are tooling and kitting your police service, who are supposed to protect your civilians, to fight your civilians. No, they are not soldiers. If they want to apply to be soldiers, let them leave the police and join the military. But the military doesn't go around killing people like that. So number one, retrain the police. Number two, don't take the police's word for everything. If the police does not have their body cam on for any arrest, that person must walk. The state has given you body cams. We need those body cams to help us with evidence so that the state prosecutors can prosecute the criminals in society and put them away and get justice for all of us. But you have a body cam and your body cam is not working. Why is it not working? You have a gun. You have shot somebody and you haven't made a report on it. Every time a gun has to be pulled out, a report has to be made, whether it is shot or not. And I think the lawyers will know more about this. Once you have to pull out that gun, you must make a report, because maybe that will tell us that you're psychologically unstable and unfit to be carrying a gun. I guess maybe that's why in England we don't have all the police people carrying guns. They carry batons, not guns. Because in a lot of cases, if people did not have a gun, they would find a way to de-escalate the situation. But then number three is new laws. Repeal bad laws, make new laws. If you look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, a lot of people sit back, whether it's Koreans or Indians or Chinese, they make it look like it's not about us, it's the fight of the black people, because this whole discrimination is about melanin. This whole discrimination is about Africa. If you're not from Africa, you will not be discriminated against. But once the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, all of these people have benefited. And not only people of African ancestry, but the Civil Rights Act helped all religions, all gender, all race, color, creed. And when I talk about race, you know, I just need to pinch and remind myself. People get confused. There isn't a white race and a black race, because to start with, nobody's white and nobody's black. We're shades of coffee, chocolate, caramel, pink, but nobody's white, nobody's black. And there's only one human race. Better, longer training to put people in the police force. Every time a gun is drawn, even if it is not shot, a report has to be made within 24 hours. Because we don't want to hear somebody has died before the police come and rewrite a story 48 hours later. You know, a lot of times people are killed. The police lie about the fact that, oh, I was under threat. And then later we get video from people in the general public that shows the police were lying. The police are human beings too. You know, I'm not saying they're evil, but they're human beings too. And all human beings make mistakes. If they make mistakes, they should own up to it. But from what we have seen in America right now, this is an agenda to exterminate African Americans. Let's call a spade a spade. It's an agenda to exterminate people of African heritage. We are being killed in our numbers. We are being excluded from the economics of America. We're being excluded from the housing of America. Don't forget this. There's history, and it's proven that there were areas where if blacks lived in a particular area, you could not get a mortgage. This was the policy of the United States of America. How do you do this? You would rather have people come from every part of the world and help them get a mortgage, but ensure that anybody who has rich melanin gets no mortgage. Why? Because they've been enslaved before. They've been enslaved before. And you feel they must still be your slaves? That's so evil. And you know, when people use the word white supremacy, I tell all my friends who are journalists in England as well as in the US, stop using those stupid words. It is not white supremacy. It is evil stupidity. What is white supremacy about the fact that you feel your success is based on the pain of another? What's white supremacy about it? It's evil. And on the lowest scale, it's stupid. You know, we need to have a strong, you know, we're not going to war to kill people, but we need to poke people's conscience for them to realize that they've done evil for too long. And if it's not them, their ancestors have done evil for too long. And if they don't want to accept it, I will put it to them that the wealth they enjoy is the proceeds of the evil of the ancestors. You black boy born in the Bronx, your father has nothing to leave you. Why? Because your father's father all had a. And it goes on and goes on. You do better than your white colleague at work. They're not comfortable promoting. Even in the fashion industry, go look at the CFDA in America and see how many black people are getting any funding to grow their brands. It's on in it's a 37-year history. We have only had one black host a major CFDA event, Issa Rae, and this was only 2 years ago. There is something wrong with this society. The hate for people of African heritage is too much. We show you so much love. We give you such great music. We give you such great culture. We give you such great cuisine. We give you such great inventions. Yet you hate us. And with all that hate, we still love you. Why? We seem to be better, godly people than you who claim you brought us the Bible. We've got to tell the truth to our brothers and sisters who are lighter skinned than us. Not because being lighter skinned is a gift from God. It's because being lighter skinned means you've been affected as much by the sun and you don't have as much rich melanin. You are not smarter if you sit in the same classroom with a Chinese kid, with a Nigerian kid, with a Ghanaian kid to write an exam for the law or to write an exam for medicine. You cannot tell me that the Anglo-Saxon kid will always come out first. It's been proven over a few years that most of the Ivy League schools were having these white folk pay bribes for their kids to be in there. You know, what exactly do you want from people of African heritage? What? You are killing us. You're kneeling on our necks. You're making it impossible for us to live. All we want is to have some peace and harmony.
We want to thank Mr. KKD for your summation. You really gone into details, giving us you know, some of the ills that are going on in our society as we see it today. And every point you've made absolutely clear. But I want to welcome everybody who just joined us. Today is the second in a series of forums that Ghana Advocacy Group Global Forum has put together. But this is in partnership with the Beyond the Return, okay? So we want everybody to be aware about this. Our topic for today is police brutality in the United States, the unwarranted or excessive and often illegal use of force against civilians by the U.S. police. Mr. Kwame, take it over.
Hi, Judy. Well said, KKD. I'm so impressed about your submission. It's wonderful. Judy, an increased focus on base biases within police workers reveals something that many already knew to be true. Officers often treat minorities and other marginalized groups differently. In the worst cases, this may involve the use of excessive force that would not otherwise be applied. What do you think about this? And then what are some of the logical, psychological steps that we can take to sort of ease the tension and also free people's mind? We're talking about liberation. We just want our mentality to be free. So What are some of the steps?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, and I so respect and I appreciate the passion behind a lot of the points that KKD made. But I mean, it really is something that I cannot reemphasize anymore. I mean, it really does go back to the whole retraining. But as a part of that sort of retraining of law enforcement, yes, inherent within such would definitely be, you know, training around implicit biases. Oftentimes we have officers who are brought onto the department who have no sense of the people within the community, have no sense of understanding how to engage with the citizens of the community. And so I would definitely agree that those sort of aspects within the retraining are necessary. Crisis intervention training as well with respect to mental health is also very critical. Oftentimes you have, you know, departments that are deployed in response to calls for service and have no sense of how to de-escalate instances where an individual may be, you know, dealing with some mental health challenges. So some sort of crisis intervention training is also a critical aspect of retraining our department. We recently had a case, I mean, I can't really speak fully on it, but because it is a pending investigation, where there was an instance of, or allegations of excessive use of force. But when we, you know, have been able to kind of look more closely at the response, we were able to learn that this individual seems to have been dealing with some mental health issues for a long period of time. And so one of the areas that State Attorney Braveboy is looking to also speak with our county council and potentially make a push in Annapolis around legislation is for a mobile crisis sort of intervention response team, because we understand the value in that and that how that can be very helpful to our police officers that are on the ground responding to some of these instances. Along the lines of additional sort of de-escalating training, you know, there has to be integrated within appropriate communications, any sort of assessment or, you know, tactics that would be very useful. And again, responding to these instances. And then, of course, defensive tactics. I mean, what are the appropriate tactics that a department can, in fact, utilize when responding? And when there may be a need to, you know, maybe restrain an individual who may be disorderly or otherwise. And so those are all of the sorts of things that we're calling on our department to look into when it comes to retraining. And then we've also, again, taken the initiative to reach out to our county executive to talk about how our office, as prosecutors, can take the lead on some of those trainings, because we understand that in order to prosecute these cases effectively, we have to ensure that we have officers who understand what their obligations are, but that also understand the law and what is appropriate in terms of, you know, responding and engaging when on the streets.
Thank you, Ms. Judy. We're going to be opening up the platform for any questions from our audience, for our, you know, distinguished panelists that we have for today. So before that, Mr. KK, do you have anything to put up?
Yeah, I think we must also situate this conversation in a very important context.
Mm-hmm.
That police brutality is not a stand-alone problem. It is a problem with American society. It is not a standalone problem. The police brutality that we're seeing now in America is situated in a greater ocean of problems. And that ocean is an undertone of racial hatred that has been simmering for years, and which came to an apex when the first Black president of the United States of America was elected. Some people were so infuriated and so injured by the prospect of somebody who they considered to be possibly the descendant of one of our slaves become a president, that infuriated them so much, they decided to start acting out. And that acting out has continued and even become worse with the election of a president who is so not empathetic, not sympathetic, not diplomatic, but your nation elected him. And you see, in America, it's not the man you respect the office. So once he's in office, he will earn the respect of the office. But if we are to tell ourselves the truth, we must all accept that the police brutality today is just a continuation of the Jim Crow era. Anybody who doesn't know about the Jim Crow era, go read about it. Yeah. Go know the history of Black people everywhere. I'm African, born in Africa, but lived around the world, and I have made it a duty. In fact, my parents made it a duty for me first and foremost to learn about the culture of the Adansi, the culture of the Ashanti, and the culture of Africa before looking at any other education anywhere else. If our parents are not making time to educate and uplift our own, the system of education that we have, not only in America, but in Europe and even in Africa today, is mainly indoctrination, because our history books are full of lies. Our history books don't speak of the goodness of Africans at all. Tarzan is a white man. Tarzan, white man, comes to Africa, knows how to, communicate with the animals, when the Africans have been living with the animals all these years. Every hero is a European. Are you serious? Jesus Christ is a European. He's a Middle Eastern brother. So we need to talk to our children and educate them and let them see the worth and the value in themselves before they get indoctrinated by what they are taught in junior high and high school. And then we also need to accept that the police brutality we are facing is part of what happens in society. It is based on color. It is not based on crime. Color. You can have a black lawyer and a white lawyer, go to a pub, get out, both sit in your cars, both drunk the same amount. Once you're going back, who gets stopped on the road? You know the answer. You can get a black lady, a white lady. The black lady may be senior at work, both go out for drinks, both heading back home. Who gets stopped? Why? It's based on color. And it's not only in the police, it is in American society. And it is not, the onus is not on just African Americans to fight for their rights. The onus is also on the children of the Anglo-Saxons and the children of all the other cultures that emigrated to America, because the United States of America is a potpourri of people from all over the world. The Native Americans own the land. We are all visitors who became citizens, right? All of us must see the humanity in another, because until that day, the dream of lasting peace and world citizenship, these are the words of Emperor Haile Selassie, and the rule of international humanity will remain but a fleeting illusion to be pursued, but never attained. And everywhere, there will still be war.
Thank you, Mr. KKD. Going back to the platform, we have a question from one of our participants in the audience. And the question is, imagine if you live in a country when the color of your skin got you killed. How would you feel? Probably I want to repeat this question again. He says, imagine if you live in a country where the color of your skin got you killed. How would you feel? Maybe Ms. Judy, you want to jump on this one and see how your thoughts are on this. I know it's a tough question.
Well, Judy lives in that country, so I want her to take that first.
Absolutely. And what I was going to say is, I think that is how all of us are feeling right now. I mean, this is the order of the day. And if you aren't moved, if you are not, impassioned by what is taking place in our country right now, then, I can only just say sorry for you. But it is time for us to begin to continue to have these conversations. We have to begin to change the narrative around what policing looks like in our country, period. And for too long have we, been talking about it. For too long have we demanded action and change. For too long have we attempted to hold, many of our elected officials accountable. But fortunately for us, we are now in an era where you can pull out a cell phone, you can record what is taking place right before your eyes and put it on a platform for the entire world to see. That is the time that we live in today. And if we don't continue to have the conversations, if we don't continue to push for legislation, if we don't continue to march and protest in the streets about the rights that are being infringed upon, and the need for greater accountability and transparency around racial profiling, around biases that are just inherent in so many aspects of our day-to-day, then we are just, going to see more of the same. So, to ask how, one feels, it's a lot of resentment, unfortunately. Oftentimes we're very reactionary to a lot of these issues, and understandably so, because it's been a long time coming, and certainly we've made a lot of progress, but we have so much more to do, and we can, because unfortunately for us, again, it is now a time where everyone is watching and listening. To have constant and steady conversations on CNN, on MSNBC, on every news station that you turn to, where this is a topic of discussion. And in fact, we're now seeing, even white folks that, are protesting alongside us, demanding change, calling out the fact that Black Lives Matters. We're in a different time, and the time is certainly now. But, I think that platforms and forums like this are very, very critical to the discussion. But I look forward to the progress that we will continue to make.
Thank you, Judy. We lost Ambassador. She's calling back, so we are waiting for her call. Yes, she just sent me a message.
I want to hear Ambassador Arikana. It's been a while since we met.
She's calling back, so how should we take the calls? And I think we have Professor James on the line. We have so many people. We have full house. So let's roll the questions, please. Dr. Ampuma, if you have a question, please let it go.
Yes, there's a question here. And,
also Irene is also so many of them.
It goes like, it says, a United Nations draft resolution calling for an investigation into police brutality against Black people in the US and elsewhere only passed after both mention of America and an investigation was dropped. The resolution, ultimately adopted by the UN Human Rights Council, instead condemned discriminatory and violent policing generally and ordered a report on systemic racism against people of African descent. The watering down of the resolution came following days of grappling over language after African nations on the 47-member state forum backed away from their initial push for a commission of inquiry, the Council's most intrusive form of scrutiny, focusing more on US. And the person says, how does African countries come to the realization that they have no cards to play in situations like this? That's a very tough question.
Can I take that?
Go for it.
Yeah, before I come to this, I want to talk about international criminal courts. How is it that it's just African leaders who are taking the international criminal courts and harassed and humiliated?
That's right.
I hate anybody who kills anybody. I hate anybody who commits a crime. Well, I don't hate the people who commit a crime. I hate the crime, but I would like the people who commit a crime to be reformed. But how come it's only African leaders who get, prosecuted at the international criminal courts? How come we don't see European leaders there too? Africa must get to a point where we say, listen, enough with the nonsense already. Just because you have money doesn't mean you can act with impunity and get away with it. What is good for the goose is also good for the gander. It is true that he who pays the piper calls the tune. He who holds the purse, determines what we're going to serve at dinner. But if the United States does not feel that they should be questioned by the rest of the world for any act of impunity, we're going to get to a point where no nation, not Burundi, not Djibouti, not the Seychelles, not Togo, will also stand to be questioned by any other country. You see, the great men, if there are any at all, show their greatness by how they interact with smaller men. That is, if there are any smaller men at all. You cannot claim to be great if you think you want to hold yourself to a different standard than the people who you consider less greater than you. So the United States is setting a very bad example. And I say this because I'm only a citizen. I'm not a government appointee. Because once you're a government appointee, it's as though you're speaking for the government. And no government in Africa, I believe, will be very happy to say these things I'm saying. If we will let our common sense and our humanity rule, we will be able to say on certain occasions that China, you're wrong on this one. So wrong on this one. Like when they were attacking Africans in China recently. In the same way, we must be able to tell the United States, you are so wrong on this one. The way you're treating your own citizens whilst condemning what China is doing, whilst condemning what Myanmar is doing, whilst condemning what is happening in Pakistan or Yemen, is not an act of true leadership. And I see the United Nations as a very important organization that should be kept alive, that should be funded, and should continue doing its work. Because don't forget how the United Nations came to be. If we don't want to have another world war, we need to have a forum where all nations can sit together and talk about the things that irk us and find ways to take care of them before they become greater maladies than we can find cures for. So I am disappointed that this whole report has turned into a little drawing book for children in kindergarten, but I guess that's the way it is. He who pays the piper will continue calling the tune.
Thank you. So my next question goes to Her Excellency Ambassador CHIHOMBORI-QUAO. I call her my mother. So but the question is, I have people sending me questions. As a matter of fact, I said, if we are getting white supremacists and Confederates sympathizing the police force, there's a lot more to deal with. So talking about white supremacy forces and then the KKK in law enforcement per FBI reports. Ambassador, what's your take on that?
You have to understand that the racist elements that are remnants from slavery, they have persisted. If you recall, the reason we have Juneteenth is because the slavers who were in the South knew very well that the slaves had been emancipated, but they chose not to tell them, and continued to sell them, continues to have slave labor intentionally. There were many who were against slaves being freed, and those remnants persist to this day. That same percentage of the Americans who did not want to see slavery end, they persist to this day. The same percentage of slavers in Europe who do not want to see slaves liberated, they persist to this day. So let's make no mistake about it. There is still a significant percentage of racist elements within the white race. The question then becomes, how do we address that issue? We address it by continuously exposing it, continuously giving consequences. Policemen who commit crime, they must be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And I think the conversations have finally gotten to the level that they should have gotten to a long time ago. For many years, for many decades, for centuries, Black people have complained about police brutality. And there are many in the white race who did not quite appreciate the depth of the problem. There are many white people who did not believe in discrimination and racism. because they had never quite seen it up front and close. So I think while it was a tragedy, the manner in which George was murdered, but it also opened the eyes of a lot of white people who have been in the dark when it came to the issue of racism, particularly state-funded terrorism, really, if you think about it. So I think the conversations suddenly have gotten to the forefront. Conversations are being given the attention, and many were jolted into waking up. Many in the white race were jolted into waking up and realizing, oh my God, this is really happening. They saw one of their own so callously murder a human being in broad daylight, with cameras watching him, with his knee on a man's neck, grinding slowly into his knee, and making sure that the last breath was out of him, and then even to make sure that he was dead. For 3 more minutes, when he no longer had a pulse, he still stayed on his neck. So they saw it up close and personal. They were disgusted. Maybe that's what it took for them to realize this is every day for the Black people. This is reality for Black people. So for us to make sure that we lower the numbers, the percentages of white men who are racist and the racist elements within the police force, we need to make sure that we continue to prosecute each and every one of them. There has to be consequences. In the past, there has not been consequences. Many men in uniform have committed crimes and they were not prosecuted, even when the evidence was just as blatant. So the conversations that are needed, they seem like they're taking place. Legislation needs to be done to make sure that the police are not treated any differently from other citizens. When they commit a crime, they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. So we continue. It's a conversation that's not going to stop, but we must know that those racial elements are there. Systematic, institutionalized racism must come to an end. Legislation must address all those issues at every level to make sure that those who try to use legislation to abuse and commit crimes in the name of doing their work, using the laws that exist currently, they must be prosecuted, and we need to put an end to that. So I don't think it's anything that's going to be done overnight, but it is going to take continued conversation, especially what we saw happening with people coming to the streets and demonstrating. We're going to see, hopefully, some movement. Are we going to see complete movement that we need? I don't think so. That's why we must not relax. We should continue to advocate. We should continue to speak out, and we should continue to demonstrate where we need to demonstrate. It's an ongoing conversation.
Right. So there's a follow-up question from the audience, and this is for Ambassador Arikana. The question goes like, it says, knowing that 1% of police officers are indicted on cases in the US, as opposed to 90% for civilians, where is the confidence in the judicial system for Blacks?
The confidence is not there. That's why you saw the people coming out in the numbers that they did, particularly this time, because it was so blatantly wrong. We had never quite seen it. I know many people have been killed, but we'd never quite seen it take the evilness that it took with George Floyd. So again, it just goes back to, we've got to continue to speak out. We've got to continue to complain. We've got to continue, especially this year, we are coming up. We must vote. We must make sure that our leaders understand our wishes, and they must be our mouthpieces. We must analyze all the issues pertaining to race, whatever elements of the law they are using to allow these police officers to get away with it. They must be readdressed. They must be revisited, because at the end of the day, when somebody blatantly commits a crime, they must be treated the same way. That's where we went wrong, and that's where the police officers knew they could do it and get away with it, because they would always find others who are sympathizers, especially the district attorneys, who are also in bed with police officers. So they were the ones who were giving a blind eye. Rather than indicting these police officers, they would be They're part of the crowd. Even some of the district attorneys, we need to start looking at them as well. They could also be part of the KKK. There could be racist elements within the district attorney. Because when you look at those district attorneys who refuse to prosecute, wherein lies the problem. They are part of the team.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Ambassador. KKD.
Yeah, but I must say, it's not just the KKK elements amongst the district attorneys that I have a problem with. I have a problem with the district attorneys in general. The reason being, the district attorneys need the police to be able to prosecute all their cases.
Mm-hmm.
So these very police people that you need to be able to prosecute all your cases are the very ones that on occasion you have to prosecute. So we may have to possibly look at a special unit that deals with cases where the police are complicit. Because you see, the success of the district attorney's work is reliant on the evidence from the police. And that's a daily grind. And I believe Judy can speak to that. Now, this person who relies on the police on a daily basis to be able to get their work done effectively now has to turn and prosecute the police. I don't think you're going to get the best results. There has to be a special unit, a multiracial unit that is set up. Like in Ghana, we have a PIP. And if you have any problem with the police, they will investigate it, right? They will follow up on it. And I believe in the UK, we have a similar thing. In the US, you must have a special force of good citizens and lawyers who just deal with because the police brutality and the cases of the police being complicit in crime is too much. You know, there are stories and real ones too, you know, where the police confiscate drugs and give it to boys in black neighborhoods to sell. And then if the boys don't get the money back to them, they kill these boys, you know, just to make sure that nobody gets to know the deals they're doing. Now, this district attorney who has 27 cases to work on in 2 weeks and relying on the police for the evidence for all these 27 cases is also going to court to prosecute the same police person. They're not going to do it wholeheartedly. So that's another part that we really, really have to look at, because even the black district attorneys are not really serving the black people of the United States of America, because the problem is systemic. The problem is a national one. The motive and mission of many in the police today is to cause an arrest by any means of any African American or African, to humiliate, to present falsehoods for them to be prosecuted or persecuted, to be incarcerated, and then used for cheap labor because they can't get the free labor they got in the slave era. The hatred based on skin color is so pervasive. If the police is a microcosm of the United States of America, then one can rightfully say, as a member of the only one human race, that the US of A, the home of the free, or the home of the brave, land of the free, or home of the free, land of the brave, is enforcing, protecting, and committing the same violations and crimes as the lynchings of the Jim Crow era. And if you refuse to acknowledge your sickness, you justify your refusal to take your medicine. This is the problem of the United States of America and its police force, which is actually a microcosm of the entire nation.
Thank you, Mr. KKD. There's another question from Kofi Boateng, and this question goes to Ambassador Arikana. He says, more than 20 senior African leaders in the UN have called on the world to go beyond and do more to end racism. Not enough can ever be said about the deep trauma and intergenerational suffering that has resulted from racial injustice perpetrated through centuries, particularly against people of African descent. To merely condemn expressions and acts of racism is not enough. What quantifiable actions need to be done now for a positive change?
Well, we are definitely, to the United Nations, we are owed reparations. I have serious issues with the United Nations in the manner in which they deal with issues when it comes to Africa. Mm-hmm. You look at the situation with the Japanese. The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Even they got reparations. The Jews got reparations. But when it comes to issues of discussing reparations for the Africans, everybody gives a blind eye. It's like it never happened. It actually, when you talk about the United Nations, I have special issues with the United Nations. I don't even know why African countries belong to the UN. That institution was not set up to serve the Africans. We're just there to say we were there, present say, so to speak. When you look at the abuse of the Africans, the continued abuse of the Africans by the former colonizers, blatant issues that countries like France, when you look at what France is doing in Africa, funding the terrorists, funding the governments, continuously keeping African countries in turmoil. When you look at all conflict countries in the world today, 40% of the conflict countries are in Africa. And when you analyze and say of the 40% in Africa, how many countries are there? It's a total of 19 countries. Of the 19 countries, 17 are former French colonies. Everyone knows that France, excuse me, is the biggest risk to peace and security in Africa. I have to drink some water, excuse me.
I'll get some water.
Yeah.
Well, let her get some water. But while she gets some water, I must say, in all fairness, France needs to take its part of the blame. But let us blame the dummy African leaders as well. Because if the dummy African leaders determined that no, we've got to change the narrative, something will change. For as long as you have selfish and greedy people in government, in positions of leadership, they will prefer servitude to a foreigner than to fight for the freedom and development of their own people. So yes, let us apportion blame where it is due. France is corrupt. It's true. But they won't be corrupt if you don't have dummies for leaders in Africa. Look, in Ghana, let me use my own country as an example. Which Chinese person knows where to find gold in Ghana? How do the Chinese people bring their mining equipment into Ghana? Don't they come through the ports? Are the mining equipment like pressing irons? And when they get to the place where they're going to mine the gold, aren't there chiefs and elders? And if they're mining the gold, who helps them to get the gold from the ground? Isn't it Ghanaian people? How do they get the documents to even go there to mine the gold? So yes, I agree with Ambassador Arikana. Let us talk about France, but let us also use the same venom for the dummy African leaders that we have. We've got to a point where, as we fight to ensure there is no police brutality in America, we must fight to ensure anybody who is seen to be a greedy and selfish leader in Africa must be taken out and never brought back. All their stuff confiscated and must go to jail. Because we talk too much about how the colonizer has hurt us. We must also start seeing who amongst us is continually selling us out to the colonizer. So back to you, Ambassador Arikana.
Yes, so I was saying, so when you look at the 17 out of 19 conflict countries, they're all French, 17 of them are French, former French colonies. The reality on the ground, if I may focus on the former French colonies, because they seem to be the nucleus of a lot of problems. You look at the Sahel region, if you look at now they're spilling into northern Nigeria, look at the Horn of Africa, you look at Central Africa in Cameroon, DRC, South Sudan. So that's where you begin to see that it becomes a chicken and egg. The average leader from the former French colonies, they cannot say anything or do anything without permission from France. The consequences for going against France in the past have been pretty severe, where we know of the 26 or rather 22 African heads of states who were assassinated, 16 it's documented that the French were behind the assassinations. These leaders were assassinated for 3 reasons. One, you either wanted to go against the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization, or you did not go along with your decisions, your policies were going against the wishes of the French. And so you'll find that leaders were leading in fear of the consequences from France to this day. I can tell you, to give you an extent to what France has control in Africa. I was having lunch with the team of ministers and other officials after having a discussion on the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And one of them made a very casual comment and said, well, did we get permission from France? If we don't get permission from France, this implementation of the AFCFTA is never going to work. I almost choked on my food because I was expecting to see a similar reaction from the others on the table with me. There were 10 of us. They all just kept on eating like, yeah, it was a known fact. That is our reality that people are not realizing. So now you begin to say, when you look at it and say, what kind of a leader are you if you can make a decision about your country?
Those are the dummy African leaders.
Hold on
the dummies.
Hold on a second. Let me say this. If you were to take an average country, let me go back to the Central and some parts of West Africa. You have no control of your financial resources. You have no control of your mineral resources. You have no control of your military. The French are actually in your country and they have a right to invade you without notice. Their companies in France have the first right of refusal of all your contracts, public and private. They have the first right of refusal of your minerals and your oil discovered and yet to be discovered. This is not a fight a small African country can win on their own. Furthermore, they get to decide who is going to be the next president, because we also look at, it's we Africans who are being used because we want to be a leader. From outside, we are funded, and then we become a leader. Because we are funded from outside, now we have to dance to the tune of those who funded us to come to power. Be it as it may, each African country is too small to wage a war against whatever is going on in their countries. The multinationals that exist since colonization, most African countries, if you were an English colony, over 75% of the companies in your country, they are owned by British, they are British companies. If you were a German colony, if you were a French colony, most of your companies in your country are from that country. So you have no control of your economy. Are you still on?
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Okay. You have no control of your economy. Let me give you an example of what like what was happening in Zambia with Glencore. Glencore has not been paying taxes for decades. And then the president started pushing to say, you've got to pay taxes. And finally they said, if you don't pay your taxes in 7 days, we're going to revoke your license. Glencore responds by laying off 11,000 people. That most leaders would have been afraid of that, because when you lay off 11,000 people, you are impacting lives of probably 55,000 people. So they're less likely to do that. You have several of those companies that can do that to you at any time. But this time, this president says, I don't care. You put out a tender and said, these mines are now available for sale. And of course, many companies came in wanting to acquire the mines. Needless to say, then Glencore then came back and called the people back to work. But not every leader can do that, because the consequences are too harsh. I'm not saying that's an excuse, but I'm simply saying we must understand the situation for the totality of it, to say the average African leader is not completely in control of their country. There are so many other issues that are going on. France right now has been documented that they're supporting African governments during the day, and at night they're supporting the terrorist organizations, because they want the fighting to continue. The average African country is not equipped, is not financially able to deal with the threats coming from outside. What is needed is for all of the West African countries to come together and speak with one voice. That is the only way they can defeat France. When Africa can come together and speak with one voice, that is the only way we can defeat France. The former colonizers are way too powerful for individual African countries to fight them. Keep in mind, for them, continuing to exploit Africa is a sheer survival tactic for them. It's a do or die. So you know they're gonna fight to the bitter end. I'm only asking that as Africans, we understand the full, complete picture before we limit on one issue, which will be like if we were to say problems are from 1 to 10, yes, leadership is around 5, but if to deal with 5 without addressing 1, 2, 3, and 4, nothing is gonna change. All of you right now, you could go to Africa and be the president of your next country. You're going to be faced with the same situations. You will not be able to make a difference for your people until the basics are addressed, until the root causes of the problems are addressed. The multinationals must get out or pay taxes like everybody else, behave like everybody else. The monopoly that a lot of these countries have over local people has got to be addressed. So there are issues that we have to look at. And then the biggest one is our own minds, because they are using us Black people to take ourselves down. Let me conclude by saying, a friend said it very nicely, if you want to hide something from a Black person, put it in a book. And if you want to deal with a Black man or a Black woman, tell another Black man or a Black woman, they'll do it for you. Wherein lies our problem? We are being used as instruments of our own self-destruction. Are we ready to change as individuals? Are we ready to say we're going to come together to defeat a common enemy? The answer is right now, no, we are not. So until we are ready to fight to the bitter end, until we are ready to unite to the bitter end for the better good of our race, then and only then can we wage a successful war. But to continue to be noisemakers and we're not ready to do what it takes, forget it. It doesn't work like that. When Black people are ready to unite, when we are ready to say no more self-hate, no more divisions, rule of divide and conquer must die, then and only then are we going to wage a war that we can actually win as a race.
Awesome, awesome. I think I have one person who wants to ask a question here. Yes, it's the same question about white supremacists. It goes to Judy, the state attorney's office. Judy, so it says like the KKK and the law enforcement agencies, I mean, they're brutalizing and being accepted in the police force. How can we prevent them? How can we scrutinize, I mean, do the due diligence and then run their background checks and see that they are not fit for the job? Judy, your take, please.
Yeah, I think it just goes back to my prior point around, you know, greater transparency. I mean, KKD mentioned, you know, around having an individualized unit that is designated specifically for investigating and looking into the prosecution of cases that involve officers. What I'll say in response to that is that was actually one of the priorities that State's Attorney Braveboy ran on. She ran on, you know, her goal and her desire to create a public integrity unit within our office that would restore confidence in our community, that would ensure that the community could hold our office accountable to investigating these bad actors in the police department. And so, you know, I've been fortunate to have been her campaign manager at the time, and now her chief of staff, to see that evolve. That was the first thing that she did when we came into office, was to create a transparent public integrity unit. And we have, in fact, prosecuted 2 officers now that we secured convictions on. So we understand, you know, we hear the concerns of our community. We understand their concerns and their issues around the distrust that is had with many of our officers, and that, you know, the level of distrust that many of these citizens harbor towards police officers that are, again, supposed to serve them, which is why we, you know, have been committed to holding these officers accountable for any abuse of power or illegal actions that they may commit. And so, I mean, he's right. You know, we have to work hand in hand with these officers daily. And so our independent unit, along with also employing, you know, an independent use of force expert to really look into these investigations involving officer actions and misconduct, is very necessary. We understand that, you know, sort of departmental mentality, oftentimes with, you know, superiority when it comes to policing, is historical. And we have to be able to break that down, to retrain, to ensure that we have good officers that are out in our community actually protecting and serving the citizens. But I do believe that that is where, you know, having elected officials in place that will prioritize this as an issue is key. And State's Attorney Braveboy has been very committed to that. I also certainly agree 1000% with the point that Her Excellency raised with regard to our people in terms of reconditioning our minds. It's a paradigm shift, and the narrative and the conversations have to begin to change as they have. But it's not just about changing the conversation, it's about taking up the action that is necessary to ensure that, you know, our rights are preserved and that we are continue to have the protection and the rights that are afforded to us constitutionally. And I'll just end there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I just want everybody to know that we have lots of questions coming in. I see it right here, lots of questions.
But you've run out of time.
We have run out
at 9.
So
absolutely.
we just want the ambassador to wrap up by answering one question, and then
we'll round it up and we'll keep going. Thank you.
Ambassador, I think somebody has a question. It says, I have not heard address is the role of the for-profit industry, and that includes not only building to look up people, but also things like teaser surveillance equipment. That's somebody's, it's a black people on the continent and black in the diaspora. So the person who wants ambassador to answer that question, he just came in, and then we also, ambassador also has her own foundation going on. She will talk a little bit about that, and then we wrap it up, please.
Okay, you were talking about for-profit organizations. Frame the question again. I didn't quite understand the question.
She said, I've not heard any question being addressed, the role for the profit industry, and that includes not only building to look up, and then concerning, it's not straightforward. It's also, the bottom line is not heard anybody talking about black people in the diaspora as in connection with the continental Africans. That's the question.
Okay, black people in the diaspora, it goes back again to the mind. Other diaspora organizations like the Indian diaspora, the Chinese diaspora, the Irish Americans, the German Americans, the Italian Americans, the Jews, they all come together and do what it needs to be done for their countries of origin. Black people, we have never been together in any meaningful way. We are good complainers. We complain about everything. We can't get along even as black people in one neighborhood. We're too proud to be the only black person living in a white neighborhood. And that's supposed to be some kind of badge of honor. We are sick people when it comes to our inability to believe in ourselves. We are the only race that's too eager to belong to other races. And yet those other races are going to be shunning us away. So what's needed is for us to wake up and wake up from our slumber and realize that our survival is and our strength is in our unity. We must come together, we must unite, particularly now for the purposes of going to Africa and benefit from the African continental free trade area opportunities that are coming up. If we do not unite, those who do not belong to Africa, those who are not Africans, those who are not inheritors of what Africa has, unfortunately, they're the ones who are going to build Africa, and they're the ones who are going to benefit from the continent. So on that note, since leaving office, I've started an organization, which is a nonprofit called African Diaspora Development Institute. I'm hoping that all organizations can be in the diaspora, can be part of this entity. So we can then, if we could have a critical mass of say 1 million people, we want to be able to approach the heads of states and let them know that the children of Africa are now ready, willing, and able, and that they should give us the first right of refusal of all contracts in Africa before they go to China, before they go to Europe. when we have a critical mass, we are in a better position to make such a case. So I urge everyone to look inside to say, what role can I play in our unity in making sure that Africa does not continue to be exploited, because what is in Africa belongs to Black people. That is our inheritance. The only way we can access that is when we unite and speak with one voice. I can tell you one thing, the heads of states are ready for us to begin to receive the contracts if we were united. I can honestly tell you, they don't feel good about giving contracts to China and continuing to give the contract to the Europeans, but they don't have a choice. Like I said earlier, not a single African country today has the ability to build a railway line, to build an airport, and yet that expertise is in abundance in the diaspora. It's because they don't know how to reach us. If we organize, we will be able to benefit from what is going on in our continent. We'll be able to build the Africa that we want. But furthermore, Africa is at a position now that we could actually build generational wealth if only we could organize. So again, the onus is on us. We are not able to unite. We are still not trusting each other, but we gotta start somewhere. And I hope that we will be the generation that can put an end to this scourge. And so I ask all of you to go to OURADDI.org and sign up, stand up and be counted. We are hoping to have 1 million people before August. Failing to do that, we just have to keep pushing. Why August? Is because we're hoping if we have 1 million people, we can also make a case to the African heads of states and have an issue of the 6th region being officially approved as a region but during the February summit. If we don't have the numbers by August, then we have to wait until we have the numbers, which will take us back to July of next year. So talking about NGOs, we are looking at our NGO, which is a way that can be the bridge between Africans in the diaspora and the continent, as well as for the continent to be able to reach its children in a united way in the diaspora. I don't know if I answered the question. The website is OURADDI.org, OURADDI.org. And for those of you who want to read more about why we should wake up, understand what is going on in Africa. So when you begin to talk about Africa, you're talking about it knowing from A to Z what the issues are. I've written a book called Africa 101, The Wake Up Call. Africa 101, The Wake Up Call. You can go to africa101.org and reserve your copy. That book will tell you everything you need to know, the games that I have played, how we got to be where we are as Africans on the continent, as Africans in the diaspora, as those descendants of the formerly enslaved, the games they played then, the games they continue to play now, and what we need to do to take our continent forward and to take our race forward. So I urge everyone to go to our ADDI.org and be part of the conversation, and also go to africa101.org and reserve your copy. I thank you.
Thank you so much. So this has been the inner conversation with different people, outstanding panelists. And I just want to say thank you to Dr. Daniel Ampuma, who is my co-host. Actually, he's the president of Lucent Healthcare and also chief administrator at the Nova Hospital here. I just want to say a big thank you, a big thank you to Her Excellency, Ambassador Arikana CHIHOMBORI-QUAO. Outstanding. I just want to say a big thank you to Aisha Brayboy, who took her time and then be with us. We do appreciate you a lot. And my senior brother, the king himself, KKD, that's the king, Kwesi CHIHOMBORI-QUAO. Kwesi, thanks for being with us today. And unfortunately, Miss Samia Nkrumah couldn't make it. Yes, something cropped up, so but it's okay. We can have it another time. Until next week, Dr. Mai, if you have anything else to say, we just want to say thank you, because today we had a full house. I mean, wonderful people. We couldn't even take all the phone calls, but next 3 weeks, we're going to have another one. The Director General of Ghana Health Services, Dr. Nsian Sare, and a couple of people are going to be on here. We have come to stay. This is GAG Global Forum. Thank you so much. Dr. Ma, if you have anything else to say, please go ahead.
Just for the information of everybody, our our forums are pretty much aligned with partnership with Beyond the Return. So at any point in time, if you have any organization, you have anything that you are up and doing, and you want to partner with GAG Global Forum, we are always available to partner with you and to get a conversation going. Basically, what we're trying to do is to get a conversation going. I believe it is time. But again, like Kwame has said, for our panelists who came in today, we are so, so grateful to you. We appreciate everything that you have done. But let's keep the conversation going.
And I'm particularly grateful to Judy Sechidanso, who is the Chief of Staff to Aisha Breboy, a proud Ghanaian. Judy, thank you so much. And I see Jifa on the Professor James Ajay, and then everybody who came on. We have tons of them. We appreciate you, and especially everybody on Ghana Advocacy Forum. We do appreciate you. Thank you.